Namaste to all of you. I am continuing from where I left last time in our discussions about Indian culture. Of course, it's not a discussion, it's a monologue, only I am speaking, but that is the problem with all online teaching or online sharing. I wish all of you were there in front of me so that we could discuss certain traits of Indian culture. Taking up from where I stopped last time, I am elaborating upon certain values, certain principles, certain doctrines as espoused by Indian culture. Indian culture is based upon a thorough understanding of human being, a thorough understanding of what the human being is, who the human being is, what the world is, when the world was created, what is the relationship between the human being and the world. These are the facts upon which Indian culture is based. It answers or provides answers to the basic aspirations of human being, which unfortunately is missing in modern day life. Whether it is philosophy or modern psychology, even till today we have not yet come out with a unanimous understanding of what consciousness is, what a man is, what is the purpose of human being in this life. And that is why there is dissatisfaction in human being despite progress on the material front, despite becoming more and more affluent, despite enjoying the comforts of life. At the core, there is dissatisfaction, there is something left to be desired. We are not fulfilled. And this is the area which is answered by Indian culture. And that is why the cultural values are existing, thriving, progressing, flourishing from time immemorial. I am taking up now the cornerstone of Indian culture, and that is the law of karma. In brief, law of karma is essential to understand Indian philosophy, Indian culture, Indian way of life, Indian psychology. It is the cornerstone of Indian way of thinking. Law of karma is considered as cosmic justice. And when we use the word cosmic justice, it is differentiated from human justice in that cosmic justice is infallible, inviolable. It does not fail, you cannot violate it. Unlike human justice, which, as all of us know, is not all the time successful in providing justice in the right sense. In simple biblical terms, the law of karma can be stated as you sow, so shall you reap. Sowing refers to planting seeds. Based upon what seed you have planted, the tree will grow. If you plant a mango seeds, you cannot expect apples to grow. So depending upon your actions, the consequences for those actions, the law of karma stands for action in a comprehensive sense. This action is not only external actions but also internal experience of the mind. Everything is covered in this all inclusive term of karma. So depending upon what karma you perform, the same consequences, appropriate consequences, proportional consequences you will get. So what you are is based upon the acts that you have done in the past. The consequences is what you are bearing now, enjoying or suffering now, and what you are going to do today is what you will enjoy later on. I am not going to go detail into the law of karma because it becomes a discussion on its own merit independently. But the law of karma is what gives rise to the belief in reincarnation, in samsara, birth, death, rebirth cycle, continuously happening till the time you are not extinguished all the consequences of the actions that you have performed. You will have to take birth again, otherwise the law of karma fails. So law of karma on one side is infallible, inviolable, on the other side it is totally optimistic, because it holds up the thought that you are the architect of your future, because today what you are going to do is what is going to make your future there. It is total optimism, and quite the opposite of what misinformed people think of law of karma as fatalistic or deterministic. I am going to the next doctrine, and that doctrine is the doctrine of Purusharthas. Purushartha stands for the ends of human life, aims of human life. What do human beings live for? This Purushartha theory puts forth four Purusharthas which are achieved or desired to be achieved by human beings in life. These are the goals of human life. The four Purusharthas are Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. I will take it up in a slightly different sequence to build up the logic. The first Purushartha I am talking about is Kama. Kama refers to fulfillment of sensual and sexual desires. This is the first Purushartha. The next Purushartha is Artha. Artha refers to material resources. In modern world, in short, it refers to money at your disposal. Dharma I will take it up independently also, refers to righteousness or the morality involved in life, moral values, ethical principles. The fourth Purushartha is Moksha, freedom, and in this context, it is spiritual freedom. To consider a little bit the Purushartha theory. The Purushartha theory recognizes that Kama or fulfillment of desires is a must. This Kama is universally applicable for all human beings, whether it is a yogi in the Himalayan mountains or a rich metalist in a metropolitan city. Both of them are subjected to Kama. Not only that, human beings share the Kama value with animals also. Animals also have basic urges, basic instincts which have to be fulfilled. By placing Kama as the first Purushartha, we understand that till the time you do not address the issue of these basic urges in you, you cannot accomplish anything in life. I am saying address, I am not saying fulfill, because the fulfillment depends upon the degree to which this is entertained or this is felt by different people. That varies from person to person. But every human being necessarily has to fulfill the demands of Kama or address the issue of Kama in himself or herself. Interestingly, Freud made the observation of libido, the sexual energy, and Freud went to the extent of saying that all mental disorders, emotional disorders, whether it be neurotic or psychotic, are finally rooted in the non-fulfillment of the sexual urge. And the sexual urge for him was not pure sex as such, but any pleasure. He was very close to what Indian culture talks about in the doctrine of Purushartha as regards Kama there. Fulfillment of Kama, addressing the demands of Kama in you are very much essential for every human being to go ahead in life. The second principle is Artha. Artha refers to the material resources, money. This becomes important in the scheme of Purusharthas. This becomes important because in order to fulfill the demands of karma, you require material resources to fulfill. Simply saying, when I am hungry, I need food. And for getting food, I require money. So very clearly in the doctrine of Purusharthas, money is important in life. You can never say money is not important. No, money is important. But very clearly, money is important only to fulfill karma needs. So money has an extrinsic value or instrumental value. It does not have an intrinsic value by itself. This is where misers or hoarders are problems or deviants as regards the principle of artha. Money is an instrumental value and does not have an end value by itself. This is the problem of modern day man. You go on earning money. At one point of time, you earn money for the sake of money. This is where you laugh at so-called billionaires who have X number of billions at their disposal and they are struggling in life to catch the person above them who has got X plus billions at his disposal. You can see what a waste of life, because you don't recognize or realize that money has got only instrumental value, not intrinsic value. Who decides how much money you require? You are the only person who will decide how much money you require in life. Nobody from outside can pass a judgment upon you that how much you need. It is for you to ensure how much you need and go towards that. If these two values, karma and artha, are left to themselves, there will be total chaos in society. There will be not only social disorder, there will be even disorder from the legal point of view, because then human beings will go berserk in trying to fulfill their urges and in trying to earn money. I can earn money by killing some person, by robbing some person, by involving myself in some illegitimate activity. I can fulfill my karma needs anytime to whatever extent. If there is no regulating principle, neither society can sustain itself nor individual personality can be sustained. Total disorder, total chaos. In order to ensure that does not happen, the Purushartha theory puts the third Purushartha, that is Dharma. Dharma represents the moral arm of the Purushartha doctrine. Your karma, your artha has to comply with the principles set down by Dharma. You have to be dharmic in life. Once you follow and once everybody follows the dharmic principles, then the society runs like a well-oiled machine. Then the individual becomes happy in the fulfillment of his needs and in the way he or she earns money. There is no interpersonal conflicts, there are no personal conflicts. All conflicts are ironed out when the principles of dharma are followed. I will take up these dharmic principles a little bit later. But coming to the fourth, when society follows dharma and the needs and urges of karma are fulfilled by legitimately earning money, every member of society is well adjusted to each other. This is where modern psychology stops. Social adjustment. You are well adjusted to every member of society. But Indian culture, Indian philosophy is spiritual at its very foundation. It is adhyatmic. And that is why the fourth Purushartha is proposed. That is moksha, spiritual freedom, spiritual liberation. The first three are actually means or instruments for you to approach The fourth goal, the summum bonum of life, the highest goal of human life, which is moksha or spiritual freedom. This is not something which is, away from us, only applicable to people living in the Himalayan mountains or recluses or people who have renounced life. Very clearly, as people involved with yoga, when we talk about spiritual freedom, we can understand it in simple terms. Freedom from our basic conditioning, freedom from our habit patterns. When I am totally free from my samskaras conditioning, from my habit patterns, I am actually enjoying spiritual freedom. So you are giving a very secular and proper meaning to this spiritual freedom and not believing that this is not meant for me. No, this is meant for every human being. Only when we become free from our conditioning, from our samskaras or what are called as conditioning, from our habit patterns, we can live life every moment creatively, providing to the moment the merits of the moment and responding accordingly. Moksha is the highest goal of human life. So Purushartha theory proposes comprehensively, takes care of all the needs, necessities, demands of human being by proposing kama, artha, dharma and moksha as the goals of human life. My next principle that I am talking about is dharma. Dharma is understood differently and a lot of time misunderstood. It has got several meanings attached. Unfortunately, there is no single word in English which exactly represents the Sanskrit word dharma, or more precisely the Indian cultural word dharma. We can understand dharma as righteousness. We can understand dharma as duty for the sake of duty. This is what is proclaimed in Mahabharata when Lord Krishna persuades the Kshatriya King Arjuna to wage the battle, that do the duty for the sake of duty. You are a Kshatriya, you are a warrior, you must fight because fighting is the duty of Kshatriya, and only when you do your duty for the sake of duty, you are dharmic. The etymological meaning of the word dharma, dharyati iti dharma, that which holds together, that which sustains, that which protects is dharma. Dharma for an individual is that which holds his personality together. Dharma for a society is that which holds the society together. Dharma term is also understood as essence. And if I have to define the term essence, essence of a thing is that without which the thing is not the same thing. It appears cryptic, but I will give you an example. Heat and light are the dharma of fire. Fire cannot exist without heat and light. So heat and light are the dharma of fire. Similarly, jumping the gun, if I say the dharma of the human being, the essence, then in yogic philosophy, it is the Purusha. In Vedanta, it is the Atman. Scientifically speaking, it is the consciousness in us, which is our essence, not the body and the mind. The body and the mind are attributes by yoga philosophy, not the essence of the human being. Having to some extent seen what the word dharma stands for, in Indian culture, in ancient Indian history, there is entire stream of literature devoted to dharma called Dharma Shastras, and several connotations, declinations of the word dharma and what are the principles which enter into dharma, the concept of dharma, are given. To quote from Manusmriti, I would like to quote this one small line which says, Dhriti, Dhamma, Shama, Asteyam, Shaucham, Indriya Nigraha, Dhi, Vidya, Satyam, Akrodha, Dashanam, Dharma Lakshanam. These 10 are the characteristics of Dharma. Without going into detail, Dhriti means perseverance, forbearance. Dhamma means control. Dhriti, Dhamma, Kshama, forgivingness. Asteya, non-robbing. Shaucha, purity or hygiene, physical and mental. Indriya Nigra, control of sense organs. Dhi means use of reason. Vidya or Vidaya, acquisition of knowledge. Satyam, truthfulness. Akrodha, non-anger. These are the 10 principles of Dharma given in Manusmriti among all other principles given, but this becomes very, very practical for each one of us to follow. I'm not going into detail because it will take a lot of time. In Indian culture, interestingly, there is always mention and emphasis on duties and not on rights. There is never the case where a person insists, this is my right. No, always there is emphasis on what is my duty in this particular situation. So, individuals who are more interested in discharging their duties, in fulfilling their duties, rather than in claiming their rights and fighting for their rights. And if I elaborate on this topic very interestingly, just 2 points to mention here. We had in India, in the Indian culture, an elaborate theory of debts, DEBTS, debts. Debts were called as Rina. And every human being, a member of society, had several debts to be discharged in the course of his life. The first debt we talk about, Devarina, debt to the gods. What is this debt to the gods? The debt to the gods is your responsibility to discharge certain duties because you are enjoying so many natural things which you have not created. The rivers, the lakes, the mountains, fresh air, this is not human creation. We are getting free of cost. We are supposed to pay back this debt. This is the debt to the gods. So, protection of nature needs pristine purity was inbuilt in Indian culture. Of course, today we make such a issue of ecological, environmental protection. But this is there in Indian culture all the time. If you cut a tree somewhere, as a matter of duty, you are supposed to plant not 1 tree, 10 trees somewhere else. Because you have not created the tree, you are cutting it, so you are necessary to plant the trees there. You have to take care of nature. So, Devarina is your way of protecting nature. Rishirina, the term Rishi, these are spiritual scientists. These are teachers in erstwhile ancient India. Teachers for individual human beings, teachers for kings. And these are the people who educate not only spiritual but even professionally individuals. So when a teacher imparts precious knowledge to me, spiritual knowledge and empirical knowledge, my duty towards the teacher, my debt to the teacher is not repaid just by paying fees. Unfortunately, the degradation in modern education is because a student thinks that by paying fees, he can demand the teacher teaching him. This was not the case. Guru Dakshina, of course, was given. Depending upon your capacity, you pay Dakshina to the teacher. But, very interestingly, the debt to the teachers was meant to be repaid by your teaching in turn what you have learned from the teacher. Look at the beauty of this whole. And this is how ancient knowledge, even from the time when oral tradition was there, the knowledge was preserved because everybody who learned something precious in turn imparted that to others. So the stream of knowledge continuously has been maintained. Finally, if we come to Pitririna, the debt to your parents, Taking care of the parents when they are old is not a big deal. This is done naturally. But philosophically, spiritually, your debt to the parents is paid back only when you have children in turn, so that the lineage of the family is maintained, the human species is kept alive. The theory of debt is elaborate. We don't have time to go further into that. Like the theory of debt, we also have several other theories. On the social side, we have the, the school or the institution of varnas, professions. We have, along with varnas, we have ashramas. So, four varnas, four ashramas. When we talk about varnas, we talk about Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras. These were not caste. The term caste is a later word that is used, that is coming from the Portuguese word. These varnas were based purely on profession. What profession you are excelling at, based upon that you are either a Brahmin, a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, or a Shudra. Unfortunately, down hundreds of years, this profession got rigid or fossilized based upon your birth and the whole rot setting. But originally, this was the most beautiful idea. And let me express this idea that even today, these are the four professions which are relevant to all societies. There are teachers, there are priests, there are spiritual people, there are defenders of society, there are business people, there are artisans who are taking care of needs. The same four principles are there. And then we have the ashrama system. Every human being went through four stages in life, four ashramas. Brahmacharya, which corresponds to our bachelorhood. The Grihastha ashrama, our householder. Vanaprastha is moving to the forest, and lastly sannyasa ashrama, or renunciate, where the purushartha of moksha was exclusively followed. Indian culture, probably the richest culture, strongest culture, and the most relevant culture for modern day lifetime, the modern time, which is totally disrupted based upon religion, factions, political parties. The saving grace is the cultural values of Indian culture. Thank you very much.